Hey, pretty girl, you want to come up? Come on. Come. No, you just want scratches. Yeah, you don't want to. You know the camera's on, don't you? Are we live yet? Oh, we're live. Hey, kia ora. Good morning. Welcome to a super fantastic, sparkling, thankful Thursday here in Sun City, Arizona, or wherever it is that you happen to be. Happy Cinco de Mayo Day too, as well. I'm Helen Brahms. Welcome. I'm totally off script today, but that's okay. And I actually made it onto a morning live. Yay! It's only the evening ones that actually count for the days, the consecutive days. So the morning ones are bonuses. Anyway, how are you? I had time this morning before I have to get on the chat in like 29 minutes. So we got 29 minutes to chat. And seriously, I'm not going to take up all that time. It is Thankful Thursday. It is that day of the week that we celebrate gratitude, even though we should be grateful. Begin every day with a grateful heart. Wake up that I actually have on my mirror in the bedroom. Begin each day with a grateful heart. And I do. I sit down here when I do my devotions and everything. And in my journal, I write down at minimum 10 things I'm grateful for. And I always go over those 10 things. So, yeah, I don't get up unless there's more than 10. Even when I get to number 10, it's like, nope, got to write one more. So a minimum of 10, but I always go over every single day. Just things that you're grateful for. So today I am grateful for Sparkles. Sparkles, for those that don't know, is my RV. It's a 2006 Fleetwood Bounder 32W, which means it's 32 feet long. It was a 20th anniversary edition. And I have been living in my RV for 3 years today. It was 3 years ago yesterday on May the 4th that I purchased Sparkles, but I didn't actually pick her up from the dealer until May 5th. So that was when I actually moved into Sparkles. So it was 3 years ago yesterday we purchased Sparkles. 3 years ago today we actually moved into Sparkles. And somewhere around I still have that video of coming in here and doing a live, walking you through Sparkles and showing her off to everybody. And I spent that night on the old mattress that was in here, and I had these covers over the thing, and I actually slept in my sleeping bag. I wasn't going to make the bed up or anything else. And I had driven over. I found a mattress place in, where was I? In Menifee, in California there. And I'd spent the night and so on the 5th, I picked up Sparkles. I drove her to the campground because there wasn't any campsites available on the 4th for me to take Sparkles to. So I had nowhere to park her, and I was staying in a local hotel. Well, they didn't have the space for my RV. And so the next day I went there. I left Animal in their parking lot, and I found a place to put Sparkles that for a few nights. And I drove her over to the campground, and it was a little, I will admit it was a little scary because it was my first time on the freeway in an RV. And I stayed in that right-hand lane, and I was like crawling along on the freeway at about, it was speed limit, I think it was like 55, and I'm crawling along at like 40, 45. Got it to the campground and found out that I could just drive around the campground and park wherever. And they said, except for these particular parking spaces, you can't use those if they've got these boards on them, but everything else is open. If any of the meters have something covering over it, it means that it's not working. So found a pull through. So I actually found the site, drove around, and came back in the other way. But then I discovered that I was in the 30 amp area and not the 50 amp area, but also like, I'm parked. I'm done. And so I went to plug in the power cord to find out I didn't have the power cord. And what had happened was the day before, when they were doing all the walkthrough and everything else, they had it all plugged in, but they forgot to put the power cord back into the RV, so I couldn't even plug it in. So I got Lyft, went back over to the dealers to pick up Animal, went inside and said, and I'd already called them saying my power cord was missing. And so when I got there, they came out, they carried my power cord out. I didn't realize how heavy power cords are. Power cords for RVs are heavy. These are heavy. These 50 amp ones are heavy. And so went back out to the campground to power, to plug in the power and everything else. And I got the feet down. I had the sides out, but I just couldn't put the power on. And so I got back out there, went to plug in to find out I had the wrong plug. I had a 50 amp and I needed a 30 amp plug. I was like, damn. So I already kind of had a list of things that I needed for sparkles anyway. And so I drove to the local Walmart because they seem to have everything there. Actually, I drove over to the campground, the dealers. They have a supply store. I went in there and got some supplies that I needed because they'd given me a gift certificate to go spend. I figured, why not? So I got my 30 to 50 amp converter. It's just a cable with the plugs. One plug fits the 50 amp plug. The other plug is the 30 amp plug and plugs in for you. And then there's also a 20 to 30. And the 20 is just your normal 3-pin plug. And that'll plug in and then convert to 30, which then converts up to 50, which then powers the vehicle. But you do have, no, it actually goes through at 20. It does actually go through at 20. And in the bedroom, we have a little monitor thingy that tells you your power. Now, if you're on 50 amps, it's not a problem. But if you're on anything less, you have to keep an eye on what are you using at the time and how many amps does it use. And because you can end up tripping, which I've done a few times, but I got my little power surge protector thingy that plugs into the that's the one that I need to have the converter on. It plugs into that. My 50 amp plugs into the bottom of that, and then it does all its little surge protecting thingamabob. But I did actually trip it as I was learning, and I have learned that I cannot have 2 ACs on at once when I'm on 30 amps. Even when I'm on 20, so of course anything less I can, because these ran, they're about 13 amps, but then when you've got the refrigerator added into that, any lights that are on, any devices plugged in, it all adds up. So, I couldn't have the blender going with the AC on. It was interesting learning what you could have running at the same time as other things. So it became during my first couple of years when I was actually on the road, it became very interesting trying to figure out, okay, can I plug this in? And if so, how many amps? So you turn everything else off and plug that thing in just to read what the amperage was for that one device. So that was kind of a learning curve on that. But there's lots of learning curves and stuff. And so the power surge protector is a must because it protects all the electronics inside the vehicle. Learning the ins and outs of the vehicle was great. I mean, I'm following the guy around as he's telling me everything, and I've got my phone here and I've got it on record video, following him around and all this, and got it pointed here, and I'm trying to remember as well that I got to connect that. When I connect this, I got to do this, this, and this, and so trying to remember the routines. I thought, okay, I think I've got it, but I've also got the video of it too. Get to the end of the thing to find out that this thing wasn't even recording. I had hit the thing to go to video camera. I thought I had hit the start button. No, I hadn't. So I had not recorded any of the walkthrough on the RV. And so it's like, well, I really can't ask the guys to do that for another 2 hours, can I? But it was interesting. It was very interesting getting used to living in a different quarters. But I'm, kind of grew up in that environment. When we would go camping and stuff in New Zealand, we had the caravan, or you guys call them tow trailers. And there'll be 5 of us in there. We had no bathroom facilities. We had to walk across to the ablutions blocks to use the bathrooms and the showers and all that sort of thing. And so I was used to having a small space. This is large compared to what we had growing up. And so moving into a small space was not a big deal. I was just figuring out what do I need in here? And what do I keep in storage? What do I switch out based on where I'm traveling? So I had 2 storage units at the time. I had one that was a 10 by 20, which had the main stuff in it. And then I had a 5 by 10, which sort of became my living storage. So when I came back from trips, I could switch stuff out and I'd keep my extra clothes in there. So if I was traveling and I was going to areas that were known to be cold, I could make sure I had jackets in there. I have a couple of very light jackets with me and I can layer. This one had the thicker jackets and then that sort of stuff as well. And if I was going to be flying anywhere that was cold temperatures at the time, I could go into my storage unit, pull out the clothes. Like if I was going home to New Zealand, I needed my winter clothes, and it was June, July, I needed my winter clothes, not my summer clothes. So it was working out all of that logistics. And you only have a certain amount of space inside an RV. But it became a great learning curve. I have enjoyed the last 3 years. The last year, I've basically been stationary. Let's see, we're in May. So, it was around September of 2020 when I moved to Arizona. I spent 6 months living in Mesa at a resort there. It was a nice resort. It was very noisy though. Lots of sirens, lots of traffic noise. There was, it sounded like, I wasn't sure if it was fireworks or gunshots half the time that were going off. Although on 4th of July, and like I said, on New Year's Eve, I said to one of the guys, I said, it was New Year's Eve, not 4th of July, because I wasn't there on 4th of July. On New Year's Eve, I said to one of the guys, I said, there was a lot of banging that started at 5:20 p.m. on New Year's Eve. And it was like every couple of minutes, bang, bang, bang. And I said, I'm pretty sure there was a lot of gunfire in there as well. I said, oh, yeah, they probably ran out of fireworks and switched to the guns. Just shooting them up in the air. I'm like, yeah, this is not the type of place I want to live. And then my friend had told me about this area. And that's when I was house hunting in Happy Trails. And then it got to the point where it was sort of like, okay, we're coming down on the crunch where I have to move my vehicle again. And so at that time, I left Mesa, went back to California, packed up my storage unit, moved it to Arizona, although I didn't have the address at the time, so I got put into storage for a little bit, spent some time with the family, and then moved back and came to this resort for 3 weeks, because with my membership with them, I can stay up to 3 weeks. And then I had to go stay somewhere else for 7 days before I could come back for another 3 weeks. So that's what I did. Came back for another 3 weeks, and I really did like this resort. It had a really great feel. But where I was the first time, I was up in the back corner near the dumpsters and the outside of the emergency gates. And at that area there is very deserted during the summer season. And so then I was put over. So that was on Road 24. And then I was over on Road 21 and was not a bad spot. It was not a bad spot. And that's where I was when I bought Bluebird, my car. Had to give up the Muppet names, because when I got Sparkles, if you've never seen the Fleetwood Bounder logo, it is a picture of Kanga and Roo from Winnie the Pooh. And so I thought, yeah, I can't give this vehicle a Muppet name when I've got Kanga and Roo on there. And so then I was like, what should I call it? And then Sparkles it became. And then when I got Bluebird, that name came to me one time when I was sitting down journaling and just writing stuff in and doing that subconscious writing thing. And out comes, I'm going to get this car. It's going to be called Bluebird, and what price I was going to pay and all of that sort of stuff, and what type of vehicle it would be. And didn't actually know the make and the model at the time. I just knew there was one that would be, I'd be able to flat tow behind Sparkles. And then on May 12th, last year, I purchased Bluebird. So we're coming up on a 1-year anniversary with Bluebird. And so then I had to go, and that was after I came back from my week away. And so then I was like thinking, I really like this resort. I wonder what it would cost to rent a site here for a year. And that'll take some of, that gives me time to look around, figure things out. And there's a lot of stuff happening business-wise that was sort of like, traveling right now is not good, because I would get in the flow. It would be a stop-start and the business would be slow at that point. And so I decided to stay put. So I went up to the office and inquired. And at the time I was 54, and this is a 55-plus community. But I do know that in Arizona, they have a law about having a certain percentage put aside for those under the age of 55 in the 55-plus communities. And I thought, I'm in my 55th year. I may not have completed it yet, but I'm in my 55th year. That's not going to be a problem. Age is not going to be an issue. But anytime I tried to book in any of these, it says, oh, but you do realize that it's a 55-plus community and you're not 55. And I go, yes, that is correct. But I am also this particular membership level, and I have stayed in 55-plus communities before with absolutely no problems. I can book them and everything else. And so she has a look and she goes, oh, well, let me see if we've got any bookings available for you. So yes, there are ways around things. And if you have a certain membership, you can actually override the 55-plus community, which is kind of cool. Especially when you've stayed there before. You go onto their site and you book it, and it's not an issue. Even though it comes up with all these warnings and everything else, you just book it. Not a problem. We've had young families staying here for a week and that sort of thing, and it's not a big deal. And so although it is very different when you go to another campground, because the campground I went to for that 1 week was down in Buckeye, just off the 10, and there were a lot of young families in there. And I was like sitting there in the RV, and I was just listening to the sounds that were going on outside, and I thought, I really miss the sounds of kids running around and playing, because it'd be quiet during the day while they were in school. And then they'd come back in the evening and all the excitement and everything would start up. And it's like, really miss that sound, kids playing, just in a neighborhood with kids playing and that sort of thing. And they had 2 really good dog parks there, although Zeffie couldn't really get up to speed on them because they had one half would be rock and the other half grass, and she didn't like being on the rock area. She liked being on the grass, and the grass areas weren't that big, but that's where she pinned a Chihuahua. Yes, that was an interesting one. Where in this thing, there was this big dog there. There was Zeffie, and then there was this little Chihuahua. And there was 2 owners in there, one for the Chihuahua, one for the bigger dog. And the 3 dogs are all playing around fine and everything else. And all of a sudden, for no reason whatsoever, is this Chihuahua turned on Zeffie and snapped and snarled at her. Before anybody could blink, Zeffie had that Chihuahua on its back. She had her chest pressed to the Chihuahua's chest, and her front legs were out like this. And the Chihuahua's like, "Arr, arr, arr," and snapping and snarling and trying to bite Zeffie. And Zeffie's got her head pulled up and looking down her nose at this dog is going to say, "Not happening. No way, no how." And her legs are out to the side, so the dog could not reach anything on Zeffie to bite. And I was sort of like, "Good girl, Zeffie." And I looked over at the other 2 guys' place, and I just went over and picked Zeffie up and said, "Oh, we'll go to the upper park. Sorry about that." And as we're walking the other park, I'm carrying Zeffie, and I'm like, "Hey, good girl, that was good. Good discipline. That was very good." And Zeffie wasn't doing anything to except just pinning her for snarling at her. She's playing mother hen. She'd done that when we were down in Mesa. Well, she didn't pin the other dog. Down in Mesa, she's playing with one of her little dog friends in the dog park, and the owner and I standing there talking. And the owner had already told the dog to stop barking, and because it would sit there at the fence, see people, and stop barking. So we're standing there talking, and all of a sudden the dog starts barking again. And before we could say anything, Zeffie walks up to the dog, gets her paw, and whacks it across the top of the head and turns around and walks away. And the guy and I look at each other, and his dog is sort of like, "Wait, what just happened?" And the guy and I look at each other, we just cracked up laughing. It was so funny. And Zeffie was just like whack this other dog across the head and just walks away with the head held high like, "I told him." That was me. I told him. She was very proud of herself. And so this day when she pinned this Chihuahua, again, she was proud of herself because she had stood up for herself. She was kind of a little disciplinarian around there. And so I picked her up and said, "That was a good girl." I said, "But we'll just go to this other park because they don't seem to like you doing that." I said, "But, good girl for defending yourself." Because if it's like, I ain't having nobody snarl at me. But yeah, so we got to this park, and so when I went and inquired, the monthlies start on the annuals and the monthlies all start on the 1st of the month. And I was still like 10 days shy of my 3-week stay was coming up, was expiring. And then there was like a 8 to 9 day gap between when my 3 weeks ended and when I started on my annual membership, my annual rental. And so I said well, so they were able to let me pay for those days in between, which wasn't too bad because I got a really good discount on those with my membership and everything else. So we got that sorted out. And I said, well, since the site's empty, can I move on to it now? And they're like, "No, you can't move on to it till the 1st of June. I'm like, okay. So like, I didn't see the problem. The site was empty. I was going to be renting it for a year, but no, they had me on the site until the 1st of June when I could leave that site and go to the other site. So I'm sort of like, okay, I really don't see whatever. But they said, "Oh, well, you have to do a background check." That was the funny thing. We have to do a background check. I said, "Well, how long does that take?" "Well, it could take up to 2 weeks or longer." And I'm like, "Okay, well, we've got 10 days. So let's get it through." I said, "What happens if we get to the 1st of June and my background check's not back yet? What happens then?" And it's like, "I'm not sure. We're going to have to figure that one out." So they had no answer. And so I said, okay. So I submitted all the paperwork and everything that they needed for the background check and all that sort of stuff. Got back to my thing. Next day, my phone rings, and they told me that my background check was back and everything was okay, and I'll be able to move onto the site on the 1st, and I just needed to give them the check for the thing. And I'm so like, I don't have checks. Is there any way we can do it electronically? So I was able to go into my bank and get the bank to issue a check directly to them. It was sort of like, these people don't take credit cards. It's all checks. Like when I have to pay my water bill every month, it's a check. And I'm sort of like, so I just get the bill, go onto my bank and go, "Here, pay this bill for me." So I do it that way. But anyway, that's enough of that story for now. But it's been 3 years since I moved into Sparkles. It has been a great time. I have traveled over 12,000 miles in Sparkles around the country. We have been to California, Nevada, Utah, Idaho, Washington, British Columbia, Oregon, Arizona, then we went along Route 10 across. We took Route 10 across the states just before all the world changed, during the global pause and all of that. So just before the world changed in 2020, and we're in Florida for 9 weeks. We got locked down in Florida, and then we came back up through Georgia, Tennessee. Where else do we go? Arkansas. We stayed there. We've been up to Colorado. New Mexico. We stayed in New Mexico. I'm trying to think of all the places on my map, because I have the map on my door, and I get to put the stickers in for the states when I visit the states. But my ruling, and everybody has their own rules for this, my ruling is that I cannot fill a state in unless I have stayed a minimum of 2 nights in that particular state and have left the campground. So gone and seen some attraction, experienced something outside of the campground, and it's got to be a minimum of 2 nights. So that's my ruling for being able to fill in a state on my map, because there's gaps. Because if you follow the route of the 10, there's gaps between states. And like, well, hang on, you had to go through those 2 states to get that. I said, yeah, I had to go through those states. And even if I stayed 2 nights, if I didn't leave the campground, I can't put them up. Like, I stayed in Biloxi, Mississippi for 2 nights. I did not leave the campground those 2 nights. And then I ended up staying in Biloxi and in Mississippi again when I was in Tennessee. People go, what? So I had gone to, where was I staying? I was staying in Memphis. I was going to Memphis, Tennessee. I'd not been there before. And I thought, I could go visit Graceland. I'm not a big Elvis Presley fan, but I thought, I'll go visit Graceland, see what all the hype is about Graceland. And just, learn some more stuff about it and all that. Unfortunately, it wasn't open at the time. But where my campground was 5 miles down the road from Graceland, and it was actually in Mississippi. So that was my visiting Tennessee, but staying in Mississippi story. That's the one where they had this big pond area that was basically dry, but it was used for overflow. So it would fill up when there was all the rains coming in and everything else, and the big drain pipes that emptied into there. Zeffie loved running around that place. She loved it. It was because we had a flat area up the top, and then you went down into this big pond area. And of course, it was summertime, so there wasn't a lot of rain around at that point. They did have, you could walk across the top of the rim of the pond, and they did have a fenced-in dog park, but they had the gate off it at the time, and they only put the gate on it when the pond was in use. Otherwise, it was just a dry bed and lots of grass on it and all that. And so I got a really good 10-second video of Zeffie running along the top, down into the bowl and back up again. In fact, I think it might even be less than 10 seconds, but it wasn't a very long video. But anyway, so we have had some great adventures in Sparkles, and I've been grateful for every single one of them. We're going to stay put in place for another year because there's a lot of stuff happening, and I can't, and to break it up with travel days and stuff, because when I travel, I do not do overnight stays. It has to be a 2-night minimum. The only time I'll do overnight stays is, I don't know. But on that road trip I did with my parents, it was 3,227 miles in 27 days. I learned that, overnight stays with long trips, no, not doing that again. So we had a big learning lesson on that trip. 2-night minimum stay. So if I'm going back to California, it's a 6-hour drive from here in a car, and you're doing around, I think, 70, 75 or something on the 10 going back towards that way. But Sparkles tootles along at 63. We toot along at 63. So we take a little longer. And because the whole physical and mental driving of an RV is so much more, if I had a driving companion, that would be awesome, because we could travel twice the distance. We could do from here to California in a day. But with the driving distance and everything else, plus when you get along the flat areas, it gets a little windy at this time of the year with the winds coming in and everything else. So you got to be aware of those, that you got to be off the road by a certain time to avoid the winds. So there's certain areas that you drive through, and you belong to different groups and stuff. So, hey, I'm driving from here to here. and you learn about RV safe GPS programs and all of that sort of thing too. So, and you put in the measurements of your RV, your campers, your fifth wheels, whatever it is that you're towing. You put your dimensions in for length, for width, for height, and it figures out the safest route for you to go. That's the smoothest ride that you will get if you're going into that area. I did not know about that on our 3,227 mile drive. And then one of the guys, when I was talking about it in one of the groups, that gentleman says, oh, well, when I do that, he says, I use this particular program, which is what I ended up using. And he says, and in there you can put what your average travel speed is. He says, put in 40 miles an hour. And all of a sudden, our drive times were now matching what the program said. And that 40 miles an hour gave us the drive times, but it also allowed us to have breaks. It allowed us to do those stopovers at the rest areas. And that's one thing I love with going into the rest areas. You pull into one of the truck park areas because you can't park in a regular parking spot. So, and some of them actually have RV parking spaces, which was kind of cool. I went to one and I went around and I was parked in the truck area, and I did not know this for this particular one. And I went around the back of the welcome center, and here were these RV parking spaces. And what an RV parking space was, these were parallel ones, and that you could parallel park, and on the driver's side there was a little island, and you would park there and you'd be safely parked. And we've been to campgrounds like that where they actually have the utilities on that island, and so you just park between the land on this side and the island on this side where all your utility hookups are, and you're good to go. And then you just drive out. So it's kind of like a pass-through, but you parallel parking pass-through. And so it's like, well, I wish I had known about that, because we had this big open area for Zeffy to go running on, unless she would have to be on a leash. But I was happy to pull out my 40-foot leash and put her on that and let it run. But it had a space there for that. And some of them had like fifth wheel sitting there, but no car. So the owners had parked the fifth wheel there, gone off to do their shopping or their day of sightseeing, and then they were going to come back, hook up, and drive off. And I can't remember if I think that one did allow overnight parking. So you were allowed to park there overnight and camp there for overnight, that sort of stuff as well. So anyway, I got to go. I got 2 minutes to get online. So go out, have a super fantastic, sparkling, thankful Thursday. I wrote it on way longer than I anticipated, but make it a super fantastic, sparkling day. If you're celebrating Cinco de Mayo, have a great time. Make it festive, make it fun, and we'll catch you guys later this evening. Hey, konera.